Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Shanae Lee Show. So, as you can tell, I have a pretty tall stack of books here, and as you can see from the title and the thumbnail, we're doing the March book tag for 2026, the March 2026 book tag Tuesdays, and it's specifically the March Madness book tag. Now, I want to preface this, I'm not a huge sports fan. I'm like a sports fan by proxy almost-ish. I don't know if that's the right way to explain it, but like I have family members who are sports fans and into like basketball, football and stuff, and I just watch when they're watching. So I guess like by proxy makes the most sense, but I'm not a big sports person. So I wanted to try broadening my book tag horizons and trying to do more book tags that made me think a little bit more and weren't just kind of the same rinse and repeat book tags. So we are doing this one. This is the official March one. There was the St. Patrick's Day one that I did earlier in the month for St. Patrick's Day. This is the official March one though. Now there are 11 prompts here, so I'm going to try to get through this as quickly as possible, while also remembering to give you guys descriptions. And like I've mentioned in recent book tag videos, I am one, trying to give descriptions, and two, if I mention a book multiple times and if I have multiple copies of it, I will show the multiple copies of it rather than trying to shuffle it through the stack. Or if I'm talking about a series, then depending on the length of the series and how many times I mention it in the book tag, I will try to show the different books within the series. So with all that said, let's get into this book tag. The first prompt is Selection Sunday. Name an upcoming release that you are looking forward to. Now, at the time I'm recording this, the only one I can really think of is the sequel to For Whom the Bell Tolls. I'm calling it the Hell's Bells series, book 2. And honestly, like, it's Greg and Penny, and I'm not even gonna just mention the other possible ship name. Greg and Penny, and honestly, I cannot wait to see more of Penny. And my plan is that kind of roughly when we get a release date, or at the very least a look at the cover, is when I'll do a reread of this, just as like a refresher of what happens in the first book. And in this, you're following Lily, and it says, they told her to go to hell. She went, but on her own terms. Lily may not be thrilled with her arrival in the afterlife, but what awaits her there is fantastical beyond imagination. Deities in line at coffee shops, fae flirting between realms. That works too. Fae flitting between realms, souls making death a beginning. As she explores the afterlife's many realms, Lily finds herself drawn to a place most would avoid at all costs: hell. Armed with years of experience in customer service, she makes a job for herself amongst hell's demons, directing souls to their rightful circles with more than a hint of sass. Lily's expectations are subverted every day in hell, especially by Belle, a demon general with a distractingly sexy voice. The two form an immediate, deeply healing friendship, and the heat between them threatens to combust. But something stirs beyond the boundaries of the world, threatening to destroy everything they know, unless they fight like hell to stop it. Now, I did see some reviews saying that not a lot happens in this book, and I feel like this book kind of is a good precursor book, if that makes sense. The way that I feel like this is a fitting reference, a fitting analogy, is if you think of like how if you think of how The Hobbit is to Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit is a prequel of sorts. I usually say it's not a prequel because that's not how Tolkien intended it. But it is kind of like a prequel of sorts in the sense that it lays down the foundation for a lot of what happens in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Even though this book is part of that series, I do kind of see it as like the prequel book for whatever else is to come in the series. So it's like we get hintings at things happening, which is why I say it's kind of like the prequel to the rest of the series. But I don't want to talk too much about this, and we're just going to move on. And also, before moving on to the next prompt, if I mention a single book multiple times, I will not describe it multiple times. I won't give the description multiple times. And if I mention a series multiple times, I'll only rely on the description of the first book, or the first volume, which will be the first one I show. So I won't describe any later books. But with that said, the next prompt is Sweet 16, a teen protagonist that you love. For me, I couldn't choose just one. It had to be the three main girls of Magic Knight Rare, Hikaru, Umi, and Fu. And honestly, like, part of it is nostalgia. Part of it is the fact that we are hopefully getting a revamp soon. As of the time I'm recording this, I'm not sure if there's been an update about it, but from what it seems like, we are getting a revamp anime for it, which I'm super excited for. Hopefully by the time that comes out, I have part 2 for both the style and then the 25th anniversary edition. But in this, you're following Hikaru, Umi, and Fu, and they're summoned from Tokyo Tower to another world called Sephiroth to help save Sephiroth. And that is like the best description I can give you, honestly, for this. You don't want to know too much about it. It is kind of classic late 90s, early 2000s manga and anime though, so be aware of that if you're not a huge fan of manga and anime during that time. But this is such a sweet series, such a good series. I absolutely love it. Now, the next prompt is Final 4. Any top 4 books you think of. Top 4 have you read recently? Top 4 have you bought and are you going to get into? Top 4 books on your TBR. Top 4 books on your shelf. Be creative. Now, just because I am trying to talk about like manga and graphic novels, etc. a little bit more, these are like my top 4 manga graphic novels in that kind of realm. So I have 4 to show you. And the first one, I'm just going to go through my top 4 and then I'll describe the ones I haven't described yet, because there's one I have not. And this is in no particular order. So first up, Fruits Basket. Second up, The Perks of Being an S-Class Heroine. Third up, The Remarried Empress. And then fourth up, Magic Knight Rare. Now, I'm not going to talk about Magic Knight Rare since I just gave you the description for that. So I'm going to set this one aside and then talk about the other 3. Again, these are in no particular order, but I'm just going in order based on how I describe them. So first, I mentioned Fruits Basket, and the mangaka is Natsuki Takaya. And in this, you're following Haruhi, who's a teenage girl, and she lost her mom when she was young, and she recently lost her dad, and she moved in with her dad's family, and their house is getting renovation. Her dad's family doesn't really like it, or is it her mom's family? Anyway, I don't quite remember. It's like one side of her family, they don't really like her too much. And she just says, like, I don't want to be a burden, I'm going to move out. And she ends up living in a tent on the property of the Soma family, which she finds out later. And she goes to school with Yuki Soma, and then she finds out that the Soma family are under a curse, specifically that if they are either A, hugged by a member of the opposite sex, so if any of the men are hugged by a woman or touched by a woman, or B, or if women are hugged by a man, touched by a man, or so that's A, or B, if they're under a lot of stress or sick, they will change into one of the 12 members of the zodiac, Chinese zodiac, or the 13th, the cat. So she discovers that, and that is the whole premise of this. And then the next one is The Perks of Being an S-Class Heroine. And in this, here, you're following Elliot Rutherland, who's a child prodigy thanks to her secret weapon. She's a transmedicator, and she purchased an insurance package at the moment of her untimely end. And she basically has a lot of stuff to fall back on if need be. And she's in this world of a brutal time loop novel, and it looks like the hero of this time loop novel is set up for an early end, and she just might have to become the next S-Class heroine. And then The Remarried Empress. In this, you're following Empress Navier and her husband, the Emperor Chauvezio. They were thought to be like the perfect match. And one day he meets someone and apparently falls in love with her and has an affair up until the point where he says, I want a divorce. And Navir says, I will grant you that divorce if I can marry a person of my choosing. And so you basically get that big shocker right at the beginning, and then you get flashbacks leading up to it. And then all the other stuff going on after the fact. So that's what this one is about. And again, I'm not talking about Magic Knight Rayearth, which was the fourth one I mentioned, because I just gave a description for it. Okay, the next prompt is... Ooh, did I put it away? Okay, actually, let me grab it again. The next prompt is Championship Game, a book that has a competition or duel. That should be D-U-E-L. I misspelled it. And for me, like, the closest thing I could think of, there were a couple, but I think the closest thing I can think of is Magic Knight Rayearth, particularly because of Umi's character. I'm not going to mention what goes on because that's revealed a little bit later in part 1, but also just what happens at the end. So Magic Knight Rayearth is the closest one I can think of. And again, I just described it, so I don't want to be giving descriptions of what happens in each and every novel when it's a series. So the next prompt is 16 Seed. I don't understand that, but whatever. 16 Seed, an underrated book / series that deserves love. And the Remarried Empress. Like, maybe it's because I'm not on the right side of like book talk, graphic novel talk, webtoon talk, or social media just in general, not just TikTok. But like, I feel like this is definitely not for everyone, but I feel like so many people would get so much appreciation of this. And it is a little bit cathartic for me, like secondhand cathartic for me. So the artwork in this, the story, the characters, it's just fleshed out so well and just really comforting at the same time. So that's the Remarried Empress. And again, I'm also trying to put the books back on my shelf as I'm talking about them, just to make it a little bit easier on myself at the end. And then that way I can just focus on getting the videos edited and up. But anyway, the next prompt is the top #1 seed, a good but overhyped book. Now, this might just be because I think partly it's the Donghua, but also, like, I know so many people, I've seen so many videos and posts talking about it. It's Heaven Official's Blessing. I'm not mad that it's I don't think it's overhyped. I think it's hyped just enough, like, it deserves so much. And honestly, I think that would push it to, like, at least get a completion for the Donghua. To at least get to mostly the end where we can have a hinting of, like, happily ever after. But I don't think it's overhyped. Well, it is overhyped. It's overhyped in a good way, and I think it's overhyped in the right way. So in this, you're following the crown prince of a prosperous kingdom. Julien was renowned for his beauty, strength, and purity. His years of dedicated study and noble deeds allowed him to ascend to godhood. But those who rise may also fall, and fall he does, cast from the heavens and banished to the world below. 800 years after his mortal life, Julien ascended to godhood for the third time, angering most of the gods in the process. To repay his debts, he is sent to the mortal realm to hunt down violent ghosts and troublemaking spirits who prey on the living. Alongside his travels, he meets the fascinating and brilliant Salong, a young man with whom he feels an instant connection. Yet Salong is clearly more than he appears. What lies behind that carefree smile? So that's what this one is. And I love the anime. I love it. Oh, well, it's not an anime, it's a Donghua. They're in the same vein, but just two different things. I love the Donghua. I love the Dame. Like, I just love this so much. I need more of this in my life. And then the next prompt There I am. The The next one is Buzzer Beater, a book that surprised you in a good way or in a bad way. I'm going to take it the bad way, because the reason why I kind of like talking about books I didn't like is largely because, like, even though I didn't like them, there could be people who find the book because I talked about it and ended up enjoying it. Now, the book, as you may have guessed, is the Raising the Horseman by Serena Valentino, and I feel like I've talked about it a bit in recent book tags. I need to talk about it again. So in this, you're basically following the story of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, specifically the Disney animated shorts, and you're following Ichabod Crane. He goes to the town of Sleepy Hollow as an itinerant schoolmaster, and then he meets Katrina von Tassel, falls in love with her money and is trying to win her over, and then he disappears Halloween night, and the folk of Sleepy Hollow believes he was spirited away by the Headless Horseman. Others suggested that he got away, was alive, and married a wealthy widow. And the Raising the Horseman book by Serena Valentino takes the latter approach, that he was still alive and that the Headless Horseman had just chased him out of town. And my biggest issue, I mean, I had a lot of issues with this book, but my biggest issue was that you have the Headless Horseman as a character in your story, and yet the Headless Horseman does nothing. And the book is called Raising the Horseman, and the horseman does nothing. Like, it's hinted that the horseman protects Katrina and protects her descendants, but it's like he doesn't actively do anything. And my thing is that if you're going to have such a mythical being as the Headless Horseman, if you're going to have that be an actual real character in your story and not just like an urban legend of sorts, if you're going to have it be an actual character in your book, have the Headless Horseman do something. Have the Headless Horseman actually chase off Ichabod Crane. Like, a little bit of a spoiler, but in the book, it's Katrina. She dresses up as the Headless Horseman and scares off Ichabod. And it's like, what was the point of having the Headless Horseman be an actual figure, being an actual character, an actual person within, an actual ghost within your story, and not have him be the one to do the actual scaring? It's like, if you're gonna have the legends, the mythos, the lore behind a character be scary enough to scare someone off, then like, what's the point of having that character be an actual character and not just an urban legend or a story? And then also too, something that bothered me, I'm not going to talk too much about this because I do talk about it in other videos, but something else that bothered me is that, like, Katrina had the stipulation where her money would be passed down through the female line, so through mother to daughter, mother to daughter, mother to daughter. But which is like, great, yay, we need more of that. We needed more of that. But like, it was under the stipulation that they would only get it if they were also named Katrina, which, on the one hand, yes, you don't get a whole lot about Katrina in the Disney animated short, aside from that she's pretty and wealthy and was trying to pit Ichabod and Brom against each other. I think you can look a little bit deeper into her character, and the way I and my sister and some of my friends, the way we've started to see it is that she did like Brom. And I feel like it's kind of, I mean, again, it's like speculation, but I feel like you can kind of see that in the way she looks at Brom versus the way she looks at Ichabod. And she, like, I feel like she's smarter than she appears. Like, she knows that Ichabod's just after her dad's money. And she was like intentionally pitting Ichabod and Brom against each other, but just to see if Brom would, step up to the plate. It wasn't actually that she was trying to figure out who to marry. It was just to test Brom and see if he was good enough, and she marries him in the end. I don't get why, like, I don't think she would have been so petty. Maybe she would have been. But I don't think she would have been so petty to be like, okay, it goes to my female descendants, but they all have to be named Katrina. I feel like that's like a little too, again, maybe she was that petty. And maybe people have read into the story that way. I don't think she would have been that petty, because at that point, if you're making it go to your female descendants and you're not doing it to any sons, and she's not doing it to any, not handing it down to any sons she may have had, it's like, why do you have to just nudge that little thorn in the side there, you know? Anyway, so I'm gonna stop talking about it. The next prompt is favorite team, your favorite squad in a book. Now, there are so many. I could mention Magic Knight Rareth again. I could mention Inuyasha. I could mention The Apothecary Diaries. I could mention Have an Official's Blessing. I'm going to mention two. The first one I'm going to talk about is not Have an Official's Blessing, For Whom the Bell Tolls. I described this earlier, so I'm not going to describe it again. But part of it is that we already kind of know the squad from the Hell's Bell series on TikTok. But it's just like also seeing it already forming, like, it's so cathartic. It is so freaking cathartic seeing them forming and seeing this connection start to be made. I love it. And then the next one I'm going to talk about is The Hobbit, like the 13 Dwarves and then Bilbo. Like, I love it. The Hobbit movies, the Peter Jackson Hobbit movies have grown on me. I do have some clips with the live action Hobbit movies, which I'm not going to talk about right now. But the one I will mention is that they did Fili such a disservice in the third movie. Like even I wouldn't have minded if, I will talk about this a little bit. I wouldn't have minded if they didn't include Fili fighting a little bit more in the theatrical release, but then gave him some more fighting scenes against Azog and the orcs. If they gave him some more fighting scenes in the extended, because I watched the extended editions. I've grown up on the extended editions of Lord of the Rings. Those are the only ones to watch. And I just watched the extended editions of The Hobbit. And so it's like, I would have wanted to see more fight scenes that Fili had, because like not doing that, like it's possible that they recorded it or filmed it, but it's like not including that. I feel like that was such a disservice to Fili's character and what they had built up. Like, Fili was my favorite dwarf. He was my baby. He was such a lion. He was such a lion dwarf. Like, I loved him so much. And it's just like, it was such a freaking disservice to not, like, I get it, more of the emphasis was on Keely than Tariel. I mean, they also did a disservice to Tariel's character, I think, which I won't talk about. But, like, I think the biggest disservice, especially considering, like, their characters in The Hobbit, like, the Sons of Durin, so Thorin, Keely, and Fili especially, like, it was such a freaking disservice that they didn't show Fili fighting more. And again, I understand that a lot of the emphasis was on Thorin, and then Keely and Fili, or not Keely and Fili, Keely and Tariel, because of the love dynamic going on there, which I think was a little bit of a disservice. I didn't mind it, but it was a little bit of a disservice to Tariel's character. I understand that the emphasis was more on her losing her love and then Thorin dying, because Thorin was like the king of the mountain, but that was such a freaking disservice because Fili was also a son of Durin. Like, it makes me so frustrated. So, The Hobbit, that team, I love it. I love them so much. So, the next prompt is Mascot. Oh, there we are. Just making sure I had it. Mascot, favorite animal sidekick. There's a few that come to mind, but I would have to say like some of the animal sidekicks in Magic Knight Rareth. Like, you have the griffin that takes the girls to Persea, and then you have Mokona, and then you have some of the creatures that Mascot summons. Like, I love them so much. perfect in this. One moment. And then next up is Bracket Buster. A book that hurt you. And for this one, there are two. And the first one, one is one I've already mentioned. So I'm going to talk about that after the first one. The first one is The Paris Orphan by Natasha Luster. I've mentioned it before on this channel, but there was a phase in my life where it was like kind of midway through high school going into like my first year of college. So like a good 2 to 4 years roughly, where I was reading nothing but historical nonfiction and then mythology. And my second to third semester at university, I picked up The Paris Orphan by Natasha Luster and I fell in love. And this hurts. This really hurts. And I've thought about rereading it, but I don't think I can. I honestly do not think I can reread this. So in this, you're following... I'm just going to give you a little blurb on the back because I don't feel like reading the full description. But it is a dual timeline. You're in 1942 New York and Paris, and then France in 2005. So, dual timeline. An American soldier and an enterprising photographer have brave occupied France in the midst of World War II to help a little girl and to help give a little girl the one thing she's never had, a family. And then the second timeline is just figuring out the little girl has grown up and just figuring out her past and what connections are there. And then the other book that's hurt is For Whom the Bell Tolls, and I'm finally showing the hardcover. This hurt. These are kind of in the same vein where I was tearing up at this book when I read it. And then this one, I was physically starting to cry a little bit. I wasn't sobbing or anything, but I was physically starting to cry at this book. And certain scenes. And thankfully, I haven't experienced anything firsthand that goes on in this book. But I know people who went through it and... Oh gosh, I'm tearing up already talking about it. But I know people who went through it, and I am a very empathic person, and it just... Part of it is that even though I didn't go through some of these things that I've talked about in the book, I did relate to one of the characters that it happened to. So it's just like, I think I said this, I'm a very empathic person, so it was kind of hard and I was crying. So there's this. Okay, and then last but not least is Sports Bar, a book with a great setting. And of course, I had to end it on Have an Official's Blessing. And I am currently reading this for my read through. And I am in volume 2 now, hence the bookmark. And honestly, like, the setting of this is one of the many reasons why I love the series. Like, it's perfection. So that is the end of this book tag. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I've mentioned, and I am tagging anyone and everyone who wants to do this. You can do it in a comment down below, or do it in your own video or your own post. I would love to know what your answers are. And also, if you understand what the seeds mean, I could look it up actually. One second. Okay, so I was kind of figuring, so the number 1 seed is the highest possible ranking within a region. And there is one number 1 seed in each of these 4 regions: East, Midwest, West, and South. Okay, that makes sense. Let's see. Seed meaning. Let's see. So March Madness seed is a ranking from 1 to 16 that determines a team's position in its region and its expected strength. Okay, I guess that makes sense. Okay, so, and that makes sense with like the underrated book series that deserves off. Okay, makes sense. Educating myself today. Not that I'll retain that really. But anyway, like I mentioned, I'm tagging anyone and everyone who wants to do this. Let me know what your answers are, and if you read any of the books in this that I've mentioned, let me know what your thoughts are. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.